welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I'd like to share some thoughts on how stories make us human. We are, as many thinkers have observed over the years, the storytelling creature. Imagination is what distinguishes us, is what allows us to conceive of that which is not, or that which might be. Imagination allows us to give form and cohesion to our experiences, our struggles, our joys, our sorrows, our triumphs, and our sense of wonder. It is what allows us to put a name to both the void and the wellspring of life, to seek peace in our mortality. What we get from stories is just immense. Entertainment, to begin with. These are all wonderful things. They allow us to travel to other places and times, some of them made up entirely, as in the fantasy genre. And we are allowed in that way to also see ourselves in these other times and places, whether they be fictional or part of our world. We learn about others and we learn about ourselves in the process. We develop in that way empathy, which I would suggest is a necessary thing in order for us to be fully developed human beings. We form connections within the story to characters and places in the story, but also in the world that we inhabit with other people who love those same stories, who share that common passion. We experience catharsis as we go on that journey with the characters and we experience their sorrows and triumphs. They become part of us, and we see the world around us with a new clarity, a new appreciation. And stories, to a large degree, are what allow us to forge our own identity. They surround us from cradle to grave, and we come to understand ourselves through them. From personal identity to national identity, stories are at the heart of how we understand ourselves. In terms of personal identity, you could argue that what are we but memories strung together in a story, in a narrative that has coherence. Stories are at the heart of various groups that we belong to that also are part of our identity, such as a place of work. There is usually some kind of a story that is being asserted in order to reach a goal that we all contribute to together. There are sports teams. In sports, every game ends up a story. This season as a whole is given a narrative, is given a story. Or you could talk about the career of a particular athlete. That's given a story. The nation that we belong to itself. And sometimes there are competing narratives, competing stories to wrestle about exactly what the nation is or ought to be. We see this all the time in politics with various factions asserting their narrative and the validity of it over other narratives. So you have religion as well. Stories are at the heart of every religion, and some people take the stories literally, while others take the stories as metaphorical. Either way, stories are there at the heart of the matter. Archaeology and history, what are they but the interpretation of the past by imposing a narrative onto the evidence that we can uncover? You also have science. What is science also but putting together evidence in order to tell stories about how we think the world works? Stories allow us to form groups of all sorts with a sense of cohesion, a narrative that we all can rally around and understand together, and also to accomplish big goals together. They allow us to form institutions. They allow us to accomplish grand designs, and they are in fact the backbone of any given society. And stories have changed and evolved over the years. I fancy that the oldest cave paintings that we discover, they are stories of some kind or other. They're an attempt to tell a narrative. You have oral formulaic tales that go way back in almost every culture, and these are tales told by bards that are the common property of a people. And so their common identity rests on these stories in so many ways. And of course, you bring literacy into the equation and you change the nature of storytelling to some degree. You get things like the printing press. And once again, that's a big moment in storytelling because it really does change the nature of storytelling. I don't have time to go into all of that here, but I think that's fairly well understood. And we also have the internet today, which is doing something on an even greater scale in terms of changing how we conceive of storytelling. So we've had lots of changes in the way stories are told over the years. You can look way back at religious and mythical epic poems like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana in South Asia, or the Iliad and the Odyssey coming from the Greek world, or the Aeneid from the Latin world, and so many others of these great stories of the past. You also have drama from the past. We no longer tell stories the same way, really. We don't have these epic poems that, in spite of, relatively recent authors like Milton using the epic form, these are no longer the dominant form of storytelling. We've moved on from those to other things. And you have, in the medieval period, stories were evolving. And as I said, the printing press really brought great changes and made possible the conception of the modern novel in many ways. But you have fairy tales and various forms of prose fiction that exist today. Television and film, another huge milestone in storytelling, and have brought storytelling new forms and pulled it in new directions. You have video games, comic books, manga, so many new and fascinating ways of telling stories. Stories are evolving all the time. How we tell stories will change. But one thing will never change, and that is that stories are what make us human. They are where we can find our humanity.